At least 93 people have been killed in a wave of blasts in Iraq in the bloodiest day the country has seen this year. Now, the violence mostly targeted security forces and follows a warning from the new al-Qaeda leader in the country that the terrorist group is returning to its former strongholds there. He also threatened the U.S. with attacks. Our Mideast correspondent Paula Sleer has the latest.
This is the most deadly attack in at least a year in Iraq. It follows a day yesterday that saw some 17 people killed. In just one incident, some 18 people were killed in one neighborhood. Now, we're hearing from a security personnel spokesperson that the target of these attacks is predominantly security and Iraqi police. It comes just days after a warning by the leader of al-Qaeda in Iraq, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, that he would be retaking strongholds that had been those of al-Qaeda. He would be pushing out the United States and its allies. In an audio recording that was posted online, he said, and I'm quoting, and he was referring here to the United States, "You will see mujahideen at the heart of your country since war has only just begun." Now, these latest developments in Iraq are parallel to what we're seeing unfolding in Syria. But it is interesting that the mainstream media is largely choosing not to report on Iraq to the extent that it is reporting on developments in Syria. So the questions being asked are, firstly, why is Iraq not in the headlines to the extent that Syria is? And secondly, when you look at talk currently on the table about whether or not there should be any kind of interference, any kind of Western outside interference in Syria, it certainly raises eyebrows, particularly if you look at what has happened in Iraq, where there was an occupation for at least a decade. Today in Iraq, we see chaos, we see constant strife, we see a death toll that is constantly on the increase. And concern is being raised whether or not the same kind of scenario might eventually play out in Syria.
Mark Almond, professor of international relations at Bilkent University in Turkey, has warned of a grim fate for the region if the invasion of Iraq is repeated in Syria.
If international intervention came to Syria, it would have the same effect that it had in Iraq after 2003. It's going to plunge a divided society, a very complex society, into chaos, and it opens the Pandora's box to these radical groups who may not have too much popular support, but who are prepared to use car bombs, the gun, intimidation, to try to carve out what they see as a truly fundamentalist Islamic state. And that, of course, sets them against other Muslims and also against the Christian and other minorities. Sadly, in Iraq, the Christians, for instance, have virtually disappeared as a group because of the violence directed at them after the American invasion in 2003. Syria is the only country, along with Lebanon, in the Middle East that has a substantial Christian population, but there is a risk that they would be targeted, so we would have religious, perhaps ethnic cleansing, as well as a religious civil war between Muslims. And I think that is the most dangerous scenario for the region, because there's no obvious boundary to where that religious civil war between Shiites and Sunnis would end.